Hello, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and our very, very good friends George Webb and David Cranmer Underdown are with me again. I'm so excited. Thanks, guys, for joining me, and welcome.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hey,
John.
George. Hey, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. Okay, it's been too long with both of you, and I guess you guys know I've been, I think it's fair to say, obsessed with this amazing book, The Sleeper Agent by A.W. Finnegan. So I apologize, but that's just been, to me, has been the number one thing on my agenda. And I guess you guys have your own number one things. I know what George's is. And so let's start with him, and then we can see what Dave's been concentrating on. Go ahead, George. What's the latest, greatest on your J6 work?
Well, I try to do news, which is, catch CIA doing a false flag live, with the orange hats and Joe Biggs. We try to catch the live exercise live. We did that. We got the Biden BlackBerry 7 years before the Biden impeachment. So all that's great. But I also, on the back burner, have been following your A.W. Finnegan thing glue, because I think you've done 2 or maybe 3 interviews now with him.
Actually, we are going to do our 4th interview this Thursday night. So every week for the past 3 weeks.
Those are they say nobody knew Van Gogh was alive until he was dead. These are going to be these kind of interviews that are going to last forever, evergreen, because they are so good, so incredibly well referenced and footnoted. And it's the whole story of how Eric Traub, everything comes out of the refrigerator. It goes to Russia for a while. Then it comes to the US and MI6. And then it comes back to us in the firm. It's attenuated. It's watered down a little bit in order to stimulate the vaccine business. But it is an incredible story, John. And every time I go back and reread it, because I bought it on Kindle, and then I listened to your beautiful voice performance, and then the interviews as well. It is the best series. Netflix, you throw it all out there. There's nothing that competes with it in this space.
Well, thank you very much, George, and I appreciate the kind words. I'd also like to say that I am very, very lucky to have married my wife, who is, comes from a 20-year career in radio production, and so she is able to take my work and then refine it, get rid of the breathing and the excess ums and ahs, which we all suffer from, and to refine it into a podcast that she's put together. And then she took the initiative of contacting Buzzsprout. We have a contract with them now, and they distribute our podcast to over a dozen different podcast services: Spotify, Apple, iHeart, all the rest of them. And I feel like this is all of this stuff is coming together so that we can do this work. It's quite an amazing thing, and we just passed 1,000 subscribers on our McDuff Lives podcast. So things are going great here at McDuff Lives, and but I think we really have, all of us, a severe and important duty to study the sleeper agent and to absorb just how bad it is, because it is really, really bad. From the point of view of the attacks on our health that we just haven't really been willing to come to grips with. We've got to do it now. Well, that's my big thing for this week. David Cranmer Underdown. How have you been, and what's been on your mind?
Well, I've been doing well. I've been following. I always follow George closely with his reporting on whether it's the January 6th, and certainly the sleeper agent is a interesting story for me as well, because as you know, my part of my interest in learning about this has to do with my family and my grandma that died of cancer at a very young age, and her connection. So I do think that the Eric Traub story is very important, and it, like George said, it connects to a lot of other characters that that we've studied, and it helps put the puzzle together, I guess. I guess for me, like, I'm always interested also in kind of the economic implications of the, we talk about the coups and the overthrows and, the special forces and the propaganda being used to do these operations. But I'm always interested in the reconstruction and which characters are involved with, rebuilding the economies and the relationships they have. And one of the things that I discovered this week that I can't believe I had missed was the solidarity movement in Poland and what its role was. And I feel like that's a really big piece because the characters involved in solidarity were, Zbigniew Brzezinski, of course, was a big character with his Polish background, but also Jeffrey Sachs, who I focus on a lot because of his role with the Harvard Institute for International Development, with doing reconstruction in Poland and Russia, his work with the United Nations, with Kofi Annan, and the Millennium Development Goals, and then later his role in the COVID origin is always interesting. But this solidarity movement was really interesting to me because I was not familiar with it at all. But the other major character in it was, and I'm going to blank on his name, but he's the former Polish president that's one of the founders of. He was a director of Burisma, and he was also one of the founders of this energy security conference that George and his group have sort of been focusing on, as far as bringing in Prince Albert II of Monaco. The Burisma group, and then this Polish group had formed this energy security council. So I felt like that was a really good find for me this week, and tying together a lot of really big programs. So that was something that was exciting for me.
Zlochevsky, is that what Dave Zlochevsky? Is that who you mean?
I think so. Isn't Zlochevsky? It's like Alexander. He was the president of Poland, but he came in right after the Solidarity movement. His name is with a K, I think. I have to look it up. I should have prepared it, but I've posted about him a lot recently. But he was one of the directors of this, one of the co-founders of this energy security forum that was put together.
Kwasniewski.
So it was the, it was Prince Albert of Monaco, the Burisma folks, and then this Polish man that takes over as the president of Poland after the overthrow, where he's clearly going to be working with Jeffrey Sachs and the Harvard, the follow-on Chicago boys, that legacy. And then, then he shifts into this role in, doing energy security. And of course, as you said so well in your first show yesterday, that the challenge is going to be not to just go for the low-hanging fruit and beat up on Hunter Biden, but to go for the characters that are the puppeteers behind Hunter Biden. And this is where, for me, on the operations end, I'm looking at Cofer Black, of course, and Cofer Black is brought in at the same time as this, this energy security forum group is forming up with Burisma. So, that was something I think is important because, for people that don't know Cofer Black's history, he had, he started off in the CIA, and he had, caught Carlos the Jackal, who had been involved in a lot of high-profile terrorism attacks, including like the Israeli athletes in the '72 Olympics, that terror attack. He was behind that. And then you had Ted Shackley, who was going after him in the late '70s. And then Cofer Black ends up being the one to capture him. And then, of course, he's part of this this group with John Brennan and George Tenet that's in charge of, watching Osama bin Laden going into 9/11. So, and then he goes into private sector. He's working with Blackwater and with Eric Prince and those groups. And then, later on, he's brought into Burisma. So to me, Cofer Black is a real superstar of special forces and planning operational ends of coups, in the spirit of what we've studied as far as Alan Dulles and Richard Bissell and these guys that were running coups in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So that's where so that was why that solidarity was a real important concept for me, because that brought in sort of the reconstruction financial interests that go is just a segment of these overthrows. Is what, again, as you've talked about many times, is that it's their resource plays, their energy plays, their controlling ports and infrastructure, and these economist groups are the ones that really are orchestrating that. So I think they're really important to study.
Well, I'll just throw in on that because Dave mentions you go all the way back to Reinhard Gehlen, and you go all the way back to Operation Barbarossa, the Third Panzer going into into Poland, and then the Nazis created all these kind of stay behind panzer divisions, like the 14th Panzer in the German army is actually the 1st Panzer in the Ukraine army, and those first Ukrainian Panzer are the key guys from Lviv area, Stephen Bandera and all those that are the intellectual sprouts of this current war against Russia. The bio war, first in Donbass between 2014 and 2021, and then with the war now. And you just wonder, the first place they really made their move, the first place Brzezinski really made his move with stay behind armies, and the first place that NATO made their move was Poland, with the Solidarność, Lech Walesa, and all that. And you just wonder if that isn't the same group that now is just gone south in the pale and now driving with the NATO money, the NATO Poland money, driving this new attack on the frontier of Russia.
Well, that's been quite a lesson for me. I didn't know anything about Cobra Black other than heard its name so many times. I'm sure that in George's shows that I, have watched over the years, that George has explained about him, but he kind of left my mind. And now I'm really re-energized to study all of the stuff you just said, David, which was great. And of course, thanks, George, for your addition. And my thing to toss in there is that this is all happening, if I'm not mistaken, about the same time that Pope Paul VI dies, and he's Montini, the guy that was cooperating with Dulles and all of the Ratline people. Then you get John Paul I, who is this kind of really almost a good guy that somehow by some mistake got elected to be the Pope. And, it took him 30 days to get rid of him. And, very suspicious circumstances with Cardinal Marcinkus of Cicero, Illinois, who had no experience being a banker, was appointed to be the head of the Vatican's bank. And this is going on at the same time. And then guess who gets to be the next pope? Wojtyla, the Polish guy. And I am sure that is also tied in to the machinations that you just described, David.
He absolutely was involved in the solidarity movement, and that is actually part of the story that I kind of left out. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, so and then that goes to the Club of Rome and all of this depopulation stuff, and everything starts to look like one great big conspiracy. Oh no, YouTube's going to kill me now.
I like to keep it. I have a point on the map, right, which is Macduff, your dad, and then I have the compass, and you can make the compass go out or keep it tight. And I like to keep as tight a loop around your dad as I possibly can, because I know I can always go to you and the research community for verification and validation. And one of the names that comes up is Golitsyn, which is the person that they bring in to compete with Golanowski. And Golanowski, for those who don't remember, is this guy they call Sniper. It's his nickname is Sniper, and he's a Eastern European guy in this inner circle in Poland. And John's dad's involved in breaking a spy ring there in Warsaw, a compromise operation, it looks like. And then Golanowski comes to America, and he's going to say, hey, this Lee Harvey Oswald is a CIA guy. And hey, here are all these 62 agents that Kissinger is sending over, like Eric Traub. After they pick up all the chips after the end of World War II, they send a lot of people over to the Soviet Union to give the Soviets this, a head start on bioagents, especially. Then they bring them back to the United States. And this Golanowski, for people who don't remember the story, has a list of 62 agents that Henry Kissinger, this is 1960, 61, 62, when your dad's in the Joint Chiefs, and he's going to bring these people in the United States. And it doesn't come up again until 1973 or maybe 71, when the confirmation hearings for Henry Kissinger come up for Secretary of State. And then this Golanowski comes forward. That's still a story that I think is, because that's where I think NATO forms. They're going to form their stay behind army, their strategy. They did it in Italy first with the strategy of tension, but they're really reaching now into the old Soviet Union, the satellite states, with their programs. And that's a fascinating period to study. And your dad's in the middle of the whole thing. It's really exciting.
Well, since we're going there, let me also say that John Loftus, who we've talked about many times, author of a number of important books, but kind of out on a limb on his own. There hasn't been a lot of support for what he's had to say, although it's very well documented. His first book, The Belarus Secret. I am when I'm not looking at the sleeper agent, I'm reading The Belarus Secret, because it talks about all of these guys that I know were the 68,000 files. The 68,000 files that my dad had supervisory review over, the applications. This is them. I mean, it's like Wayne Madston told me when we were down in Florida back in 2019, George, when we took that trip. And I asked Wayne what he thought was that 68,000 files. He said Eastern Europeans being brought in. And, he's a good authority. I think he's right. But now with this book, and I can see it's the Belarusians as well as the Ukrainians. It's not just the Ukrainians. And so to bring in what he's now brought to the table, I think is going to be a great addition to our understanding of that era. And certainly the more I read, the more exciting it is. And there's so much more, as you say, to be explored in my dad's life, McDuff's short but extremely important life. So thanks again for your help in my uncovering. We went to the National Archives together. You went there on your own when I couldn't come, and still digging to help me write that book. But this is now the time to fulfill all the work we've been doing, and now to start really facing what Adam Finnegan has called, and I think he's exactly right, the strategic biowarfare against the United States. Because this is where I think all of my studies come together, and I say, okay, I do now believe that the British financial system, the Anglo-American financial system, Wall Street, City of London, however you want to put it, is the driving force behind war today and the driving force toward the totalitarian New World Order. Other people think it's other things. It could be the Jesuits, it could be the Jews, it could be the Freemasons, but that's my decision. That's where I'm at right now. And when we consider, the studies that we've done of the policy of the British Empire, which says, Palmerston is a huge figure saying, Britain has no friends, only interests. And that tells you that they're going to stab you in the back if they can. And they've been trying to defeat the United States of America ever since the United States of America was founded. And so I think that their hidden hand in the creation of the Soviet Union, with the help of Wall Street behind the scenes, as we've been studying, created a Soviet Union that was ultimately subject to Chatham House, to MI6, to the SIS. And in that sense, has their bioweapons program been sent over here to destroy the health and vitality and economy of the United States? That's, I think, something we can dig into, because this is not a European problem. This problem is right here in the soil and in the bloodstreams and in the hospitals of this nation, and we got to confront it.
Dave, I'll abjure to you.
I mean, look at all the Lyme disease everywhere. Where, and people come up with theories, and half the time they're told, oh, it's all in your head, But here we have a book that has put together, with the receipts and the very well written narrative, the fact that no, this is not an accident. This is not something that just we have to deal with. This is an intentional bioweapons program against us. and nobody has been able to stand up and identify it in the past. So, all right, that's my thing.
Well, the thing that I was thinking about when George was talking about Poland and the history with Reinhard Gehlen and NATO, the other character, and I've mentioned this many times, was Edward Beneš, and he had been the president of Czechoslovakia. He flees Czechoslovakia when Hitler invades. He goes to join the SIS in England. He is the mentor to characters like Joseph Korbel, the father of Madeleine Albright, who works for him, and then he is the one that signs off on Operation Anthropod, which is where he partners with a man named Paul Finnis, who was the head of Portendown, and he said they used botulism in the grenade that killed Reinhard Heydrich. So you have a connection with Portendown there. Then you have, and of course I've mentioned this before. His niece, Edward Beneš's niece, ends up being a classmate and a childhood friend of my mom in Bloomington, Indiana, and her aunt ends up marrying Zbigniew Brzezinski. So her aunt, Emil Beneš, marries Zbigniew Brzezinski. So I'm looking at all these connections between the Polish and the Czechoslovakians, which are obviously, neighboring countries that were both, had similar fates against the Nazis during World War II. But the other intrigue that I think ties in now is the protege of Edward Beneš was Jan Masaryk, whose father, Thomas Masaryk, had been the first Czechoslovakian president. He worked with William Weizmann during World War I, who, of course, was the spy master in America with Colonel Edwin Mandell House during World War I. He was also the mentor. Weizmann, who is a Kuhn and Loeb banker, is also the mentor to William Stevenson, who becomes the head of the British Security Coordination in World War II. But this his protege and understudy is this Jan Masaryk, and Masaryk is the man that signs the deal with Israel in 1948 for their War of Independence. He signs it in January of 1948. In March of 48, he's found dead. And from my standpoint, it looks like Robert Maxwell is the man that picks up the role, because the Czechoslovakia becomes a communist country. Stalin invades. It now has this Soviet presence. Robert Maxwell has the relationship with the Soviets to continue these armaments, I assume from Skoda Works, to the foundation of Israel for their war of independence. And that's just another um, character that I think that ties in a lot of people because that again, it's like with Brzezinski, he had been at this Columbia's, he had worked with Kissinger at Harvard. I know we talked about Gellin. Kissinger, of course, had been at Camp King with Reinhard Gellin, with Sidney Gottlieb, with Kurt Blohm. So you have these characters that are clearly involved in war material brokering after World War II. And Kissinger was the translator for Allen Dulles, so you have that relationship as well. So it's just another, character that I think is interesting because Korbel, besides being the father of Madeleine Albright, who is an architect of the Kosovo War, he's also the mentor to Condoleezza Rice, who of course becomes Secretary of Defense. She writes her dissertation on Czechoslovakia as a student at University of Denver. And then the other University of Denver alum that's important is Paula Broadwell, who was brought in with David Petraeus. I'm going to put it on mute because Bo's going crazy. I'm going to let him out.
Well, John, that's the beauty of Dave Underdown, because he can make a connection where all these pieces of the puzzle, and all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, this is the back door, Maxwell's back door for Israel, for all these weapons from Skoda Works. And it's a revelation. You could spend thousands of hours in a library and never come up with that insight. But Maxwell is a critical character, like Dave's saying, to follow all the trove, all the takings, and all the intellectual property from the death camps gets taken to England, like you said, John, into Springer and the scientific journals. And that becomes the whole compromise operation of all the scientists in the Western world and the whole Nobel Prize, sphere of influence. And that's where Maxwell goes. And Maxwell is every bit as involved in moving these scientists left and right as the Cambridge Five is. He can speak Czech, where a lot of the Rothschild Cambridge Five couldn't speak Czech. The Rothschild Cambridge Five had trouble with Russian. Kim Philby couldn't speak very much Russian. Don McLean, who's moving Eric Traub all around Africa to do all these different vaccine virus game experiments, couldn't speak Russian very well. I think he had a little bit of passable German, but that's why Robert Maxwell is so important in the Eastern Bloc, moving these people back and forth. And I think Israel, and that's another great point Dave makes, is Israel is taking, every time there's an exchange, Israel's getting their share. Israel's getting their, especially secrets, war secrets.
And just to tie a little bit more into this, just a quote from page 166 and 7 of the Sleeper Agent, where he's quoting John Loftus, describing a counterintelligence corps, an Army interview let me just read it. This guy named Dan Benjamin is the CIC investigator, and he secretly gets information from his wife, Anne, who was secretly working for MI6. And she is in contact with this guy named Van den Heuvel, who is the SIS officer in charge of recruiting Nazi scientists, many of whom the British government protected from prosecution as war criminals. Freddie's best recruiting agent was, drum roll, Robert Maxwell, who ran a German, quote, publishing house, unquote, for scientific papers. And, and then it mentions the connections to Czechoslovakia. And it was through that they find a connection to Eric Traub's quote unquote escape, which was arranged by Donald MacLean of the Cambridge Five. And where I'm really hoping to make progress is that it seems that everybody that writes about this stuff is willing to take on the idea that the Cambridge Five was just this communist ring that just somehow existed magically inside of the British, it's government. And, they were commies, but, now they're gone, right? We found them, we got rid of them. Britain, the scepter dial continues in its moral hegemony and glory. No, I don't believe it. I think this whole Cambridge Five was well known to Winston Churchill, that it was all part of a big plot to do what they're doing right now, to run a totalitarian takeover of the entire planet, for which, the essential takedown is still the United States.
Well, I think Britain definitely wants to be the fulcrum in the teeter-totter between the West and the East, and then that way they'll always be in control. And the Rothschild teeter-totter, they can tilt the thing either way in any direction with just a finger. You can have as heavy weights as you want on either end. As long as you're in the middle with the Rothschild teeter-totter, you get to say which way things go. This is why I say bioagents is the force multiplier. Uranium is the way of acquiring wealth, because you can always blow up the other guy's oil. But if you have secret uranium reactors underground, you're pretty much safe. So you hoard the uranium, right? And then you let the whole world go onto oil, and then you tax the oil, right? But this is where I think your dad comes in again, because it's at this critical period that they're bringing these. You mentioned Bennis, you mentioned the group down in Louisiana, the assassination squad. Skorzeny and Schacht had that the group down there, Perm Index. A guy at Division 5, Tom O'Loughlin, is not going to be concerned about guys bringing in the old bioagents from Eastern Europe and then starting to poison different people in national laboratories. If I'm Hoover, I'm sending him down there. This is where I say this Tom Lyons, you follow is it Robert Lyons? Charles Lyons.
Yeah.
If you follow Charles Lyons, you get McDuff, and you got to stop this assassination squad down there in New Orleans. How are you going to do it? You got to send some agents down there, and they do a raid. It's not speculation. They do the raid, Lacombe raid, in July of '63. But this is where the assassination squad comes in with Perm Index and Bennis, as you're mentioning, and Robert Maxwell. So it's the place you would find a McDuff. You try to stop an assassination squad, Skorzeny and Schacht and all of them coming in with all these Nazi bioagents. You send your best guy down there. And this is where I say Nosenko. Remember Tommy Lee Jones did that movie about Nosenko. Somebody had to cultivate Nosenko, who was giving information about who are they bringing in and where are they infiltrating these people. Somebody had to cultivate Golanowski, to say, where are they putting these guys? You had to have somebody on the inner circle informing McDuff, where are these guys going? So I've kind of put Nosenko on the back burner a little bit, the Tommy Lee Jones movie, and I've kind of put Golanowski on the back burner a little bit because I'm doing news, but those are hot items, and I know they're going to marry into this masterwork of sleeper agent. I know we're in the middle of it all. We just have to connect a few more dots and get the full picture.
You reminded me to when you mentioned Golitsyn, I think it's important that we also mention James Jesus Angleton, or Jim Angleton as he was known, because Jim Angleton is the guy that brings Golitsyn in and uses Golitsyn to create this whole I don't want to say sleeper agent, but mole. The whole story that there's a mole in the CIA. And, you know, then there's the book by David Wise called Mole Hunt, in which it goes through, you know, decades of basically Angleton and Galitzin trying to find a mole, and end of story, there wasn't a mole. That's what David Wise says anyway, if you believe him. And, you know, I've made comments about his kind of slander of my dad in his book Cassidy's Run, and I don't necessarily accept what David Wise says, but Galitzin was a guy that was brought in to cover up, as you say, what Golanowski could have said if Golanowski had gotten to where he wanted to get. He wanted to get to two places. He wanted to get to J. Edgar Hoover personally, and he wanted to get to the Shikshinny Knights of Malta in Pennsylvania, a town called Shikshinny, which is connected to the Russian Sovereign Order of Malta, Sovereign Order of St. John. And that all connects to Sullivan and Cromwell through a back door, because William Nelson Cromwell was the Grand Master of the Sovereign Order of St. John of Russia in the 20s and 30s and 40s. And so he was trying to connect to a source that was not CIA. He knew CIA was his enemy. He was trying to get past them, and he thought Hoover, of course, Hoover having the connections to the old like Interpol and all the old power structure before this new Anglo-Saxon CIA Northeastern elite crowd, the OSO social unit comes into power. So he was trying to get to somebody to connect with other than the CIA. He was really, and the CIA snatched him and kept him on ice for all those years. And then part of the Cassidy's Run story is that the guy that sits on the telephone up in New York that Cassidy's supposed to contact if there's ever a serious American preparation for all-out war, and this guy's supposed to get on the top of the big rock in Central Park and radio a certain signal. That guy works for Pergamon Press. You know who Pergamon Press is? That is
Maxwell.
Robert Maxwell.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh man, what and it's taken us years to unfold this stuff, but golly, it's a tapestry of violence and terrorism, exploitation, greed, but murder, but using horrible weapons that most people don't even want to think about. You know, I think that's one of the biggest problems we have, and it's a meme that I saw and republished myself a few days ago. This is our biggest problem, is that we refuse to believe that the people in charge could be as evil as they actually are.
Well, I'll throw it over to Dave for the follow-up on Galitzin and Angleton.
I feel like I have a good follow-up too. So the character I want to introduce is William Buckley, who was a Knights of Malta as well. And his dad, of course, had the petroleum company that brought in the George de Mohrenschildt. He worked very closely with the Bush family and the Harriman family and whatnot. But Bill Buckley Jr., as a Yale student, was the editor of the Yale Daily News, where he was a classmate of guys like George H.W. Bush, and then later Joe Lieberman became his friend as well. But the reason I bring him up is because he was also really close friends with E. Howard Hunt, who, of course, the two of them were both involved in PB Success, so they were involved in the operations of overthrows. But again, I think this is in more of the communications and the psychological warfare. And with Buckley, he had also created this Young Americans for Freedom group, which was a it had the, Sharon statement at their home in Sharon, Connecticut, where they come up with this manifesto for conservative thoughts. And it, and Buckley also, of course, was known as this scholar. He had this firing line show that was very popular. Matt Pottinger's best friends, John Avalon, his wife, Margaret Hoover. She's the current, she revived it. She's of course the granddaughter, or maybe great granddaughter of Herbert Hoover. But the other, with with the kind of the static that George and Andy have been getting with this Glenn Beck and with Steve Baker, I've really been looking into their into the history of sort of their lineage and where they come from as far as their mentors. And the area that it seems to all go to is Watergate. And the reason I say that is because the E. Howard Hunt had worked for this Bob Bennett, who later becomes a senator. His dad had also been the senator for Utah. But he starts this Robert Mullen Company, and the Robert Mullen Company hires E. Howard Hunt, and they have the plumbers. But Bob Bennett is very closely tied with this Mormon Mafia. His main client is the Summa Corp, which is the Howard Hughes' holding company, and it's run by a man named Bill Gay, whose son later starts Huntsman Gay Global Capital with John Huntsman, who, again, another big Mormon Mafia. His son John Huntsman Jr. later becomes Atlantic Council chairman. But the other thing that stood out for me in reviewing this Watergate was the CRP, the Campaign to Reelect the President, the CREEP group. They said the reason they hired the spies in the Dirty Tricks unit that is so famous from all the President's Men was that they feared that Intertel was going to be doing counterintelligence for the Democrats. And of course that was McCarthy. I'm sorry. George McCarthy, or no, George. Let's see. Is it? I think the president was or the presidential candidate was McCarthy, and then it was Sergeant Shriver, or George McGovern. I'm sorry. And then but they were going to hire the Intertel. Intertel was the private intelligence agency that was from Resorts International, which we've talked a lot about. Resorts International, this Intertel group, their main client was also Howard Hughes. So this is where I think you have the strategy of tension, full spectrum dominance, where you have sort of the political operatives working for the Democrats and the political operatives working for the Republicans are both being financed by this Howard Hughes network. And of course, that you can jump back a generation to the JM Wave field station when you've got William Harvey King and I'm blanking on the other guy's name that ran JM Wave, but they were working with Ted Shackley. And you've got Robert Mayhew, this liaison to Howard Hughes that's working with the Italian mob and the Jewish mob and and bringing in these people to do this JM Wave. And again, this ties in to the story where it was so interesting that Shackley was involved with these bio attacks. So that was something that I thought was interesting with, this group that's kind of come forward as the heroes. And it seems like their background is they're kind of in the, Mormon Mafia of today group, and that they're, Cofer Black is doing sort of more of the operations end, but they're more of the public relations group. And then you've got, Mitt being kind of more of the, politician and doing the diplomacy, but working in concert, and each having their own role within sort of this operation that seemingly has, just gone on for, to me, it goes back to the FDR when he brings in the chairman of the Utah company, Mariner Stoddard Eccles, whose dad, David Eccles, had founded the Utah Company, and he becomes the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank. And then you have Henry Morgenthau, who's, Lehman related, kind of more of the Zionist interests, and they're working as Treasury Secretary and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve, and they're doing New Deal projects, and they did the 6 companies had done the Hoover Dam, which was a major super project. The Utah Company was one of the 6 companies, and then of course Bechtel and Kaiser, other companies that seemingly throughout the century have been key players. But that's where I see that Glenn Beck with his George talked to Peter Duke about how he had this sort of sad backstory life where he struggled with drugs and alcohol, and I think his mother commits suicide, and he had this sort of rebirth through the Mormon Church, and becomes this successful journalist at Fox, and then starts his own Blaze TV, and partners with the with the founder of the Proud Boys, and that kind of ties into what which George has talked about. Is again, it just seems like these guys are all what would have been in World War II been the Bureau of Information, or was it the Bureau of Information? The OSS split and had the OSS and the War Information Board. So I see these guys all being under the umbrella of War Information Board, working with characters like an Edward Bernays, who did the psychological public relations for that exact same operation, PB Success. So that's where I see these guys coming from, and it's it seems like they're just like George has said many times, just using ad hominem attacks, and just the same tactics that really obviously to me what the same criticisms that Robert Malone used. It seems like they'd have the same public relations director. It makes you wonder if Trevor Fitzgibbon isn't the one feeding talking points to all the listed parties.
Well, I'll just throw in there, Dave. Thank you very much. Andy Craig, a good friend of John and mine from the Washington Press Club, wrote a great book called Mormon Mafia. And he also wrote, of course, Puppet Masters, Presidential Puppet Masters as well. But he lays it out, man. Andy lays it out as far as the whole Mormon Mafia. And like you say, these are intelligence agency constructs, right? You create Proud Boys and Proud Boys TV and CRTV not to service the conservative right, but to infiltrate the conservative right. Nobody. I mean, this Proud Boys came about because of some kind of bad acid trip, right, between the daughter of Nancy Pelosi on some kind of Jerry Garcia runaround, concert tour, Alexandra Pelosi and Gavin McInnes. It's a bad mosh pit experience that creates Proud Boys. So it doesn't come from some think tank, where everyone sat down like monks and all wrote position papers. It comes from a really bad acid trip at a mosh pit, right? And now CRTV, Conservative Right TV or Conservative Review TV, the thing that they create merges with the Blaze TV. And these are going to be the people that tell the story of Donald Trump for the next 5 months. And that's who we've chosen. The anti-Trump, never Trump haters. Melania is a prostitute. That's who's going to be the people who are going to be the advocates for Trump. You can't make this up. You cannot make this up. And you know what? I knock on the TV screen and tell that. But after about 5 or 6 times I say that, I say, be careful who you choose to be your advocate. Usually you should, if you're Trump, you shouldn't have a never Trumper be your advocate, right? But anyway, is Georgia limited hangout? That's so funny. Yeah. I guess I'm hanging out at a monastery. So I guess and my time here is limited. So I guess I am.
You can hang out right here at McDuff Lives anytime you want to, George.
Yeah, I guess I am a limited hangout, John.
We're honored to have you.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is so important, and you've been trying so hard to get this message out. You know, uncrypt or decrypt the Blackberries, for goodness sakes. You know, the Biden Blackberries, the Obama Clinton Blackberries, and let's see the orange hats in the video. You know, let's roll the videotape. I want to see the orange hats in the video, folks. And you know, if you keep suppressing it, then you're never going to have credibility in the long run. You might win the election, or you might get whatever result you want out of the election, but you know, at some point the truth comes out. It always does. And you know, I wasn't at J6, but I was monitoring it closely with you guys and doing remote broadcasts, and I remember, you know, the atmosphere of it. And you're absolutely right. To go along with this made up story is to continue living in the cartoon world.
Yeah, and I'll just give a little proof point. Yesterday, Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch came out. We had said CIA ran the show, right? It turns out that the CIA bomb detection squad, bomb techs, were there and immediately dispatched the RNC and the DNC. And that came out through court papers yesterday. They also had dog teams, sniffer teams there. Now, CIA used to do international operations. The FBI used to worry about domestic security. So we know Brennan is up to his elbows in J6 already. The part they're leaving out is no tech is going to be present anywhere in a scenario without officers. You've got command and control CIA officers anywhere you have bomb techs or dog techs, because you're ordering them to go to different places and so forth. So there's command and control. And we said that the command and control sits actually in the Capitol. It's the National Capital Region, NCR, the National Capital Region, JTTF, which is a combination of CIA and DHS and FBI, and that sits inside the Capitol. And the only way you could have CIA dogs there and CIA bomb techs there is that their CIA involvement. And the thing about Steve Baker that's interesting is he's involved. He's a musician like you, John. He's involved in going to the Soviet Union and bringing people out of the Soviet Union under a music asylum. That's more associated with an intelligence operation, which is maybe a good thing. Maybe you're bringing a bioscientist from, you know, like Alibekov, Alibek, and bringing them over to our side. Well, that could be a good thing. But that's mostly associated with an intelligence operation, not music. You know, you can go and play music, all around North Carolina like he did, but bringing people in from the old Soviet Union is an intelligence operation. So people have to, but everyone's, kind of fallen for this. Oh, Steve Baker is the femme fatale of J6. He's the one that they're persecuting because he had 5 hours in detention. There's been a lot of people that have spent a lot of time in solitary confinement that were put in jail by the videos that were released by people like Steve Baker. So, I'm just, I don't want to push it too hard because, it kind of sounds a little bit grating if you hit it too hard, but it is a point that needs to be made.
Yeah. I recently got a copy of someone sent me just because they happened to have it. They gave it to me. It's a very nice publication, a book of biographies of all the players in the New York Philharmonic Orchestra in like 1939. And I'm telling you, 90% of them are Russians. And, of course, they're the greatest musicians. There's no question they deserve the chairs. But that's a lot of Russians that are just sitting right in the middle of Manhattan, sawing on their fiddles. That's not the first time, I'm sure, that musicians have been used as cover. And yeah, in many ways.
Didn't Reinhard Gehlen name his organizations the White Orchestra and the Red Orchestra? I feel like
Yeah, and
they had them.
Alan Dulles famously played the great Wurlitzer.
The Wurlitzer.
The
Yeah,
Wurlitzer, that's what he characterized his publishing of complete falsehoods generated by your man Edward Bernays and his ilk. Wow.
and then the other character that moved to Bloomington was this Willie Oppel, and he's
Huh?
somebody that he was from Poland. He had taught at the University of Berlin. He goes to Harvard and MIT. He writes these books on the history of
He wrote the Harvard Dictionary of Music.
the dictionary of history of
Of
music.
music. It's
That was
fantastic.
Yeah, and he was one of the world's top, musicologists, and he's the one that, when my mom moved to Bloomington, Indiana, to live next to, Hermann Joseph Muller, he knocks on the door. I'm here to be the head of the music school. I need a place to live. He lived with them for a year, and then, he ended up buying the house behind them. So they were neighbors, and very good friends with my mom, and his wife was in the nursing home, but I always wondered, is there a connection between these, radar projects and encrypted communications? And would you, if you're doing, spread spectrum encryption, would having a musicologist that is an expert in, writing music and understanding frequency and harmonies and things like that, would that be useful in signal communications? I always, that's part of my interest with how all these people from ended up in Bloomington, but I didn't. But as far as the Steve Baker Band, I mean, I looked into it, and of course they had the name of his organization was a funny name. I mean, the name of his band that is promoted most in the media is the American Bowie Experience with David Bowie cover band. Of course, it immediately makes me think of our friend Brian Ball and his experience with all the musicians in England, and bragging about how he'd been doing production. So it does. You wonder if these 77th Brigade doesn't sort of have their liaisons in America, and I know that one of the things that is not mentioned about Steve Baker that George had mentioned was that he had a long career and on Capitol Hill, that he thought he'd work for Paul Ryan, and that he was a reporter that was involved, for the Speaker of the House, so for, high level character. So again, to position him as just, oh, I'm just this independent journalist that just, happened to see all this stuff, it's disingenuous. And, if he did have a role, it's just it's the recurring problem. If you're on security clearance, if you're not allowed to say things, what do you do? But again, like, do you need to send in all of the personal attacks and all that stuff? I mean, that's where the pattern seems to appear with these same characters protecting clearances.
Yeah, I think, somebody says they're a propagandist or an anti or counter disinformationalist or whatever, 29 years, and says my sole source of income has been, playing the trumpet around, Raleigh, around Fort Psych Ops headquarters. I don't know. Yeah, maybe so, but he's obviously writing on a political bent, and he himself says he's a huge never Trumper, and he's written brutal. He says in his own words, brutal anti-Trump screeds, just these missives that just, how Trump should never be president. And I'm just, all I do is take his words or Glenn Beck's words saying he cooperated from day one with the FBI with his videos of inside January 6th. And I just repeat them back to him. And that's when he flips out. He flips out when he says he's brutal on Trump and never Trumper. And I just repeat it back to him. And now I'm a lunatic because I'm repeating back. He called me a lunatic because I'm repeating back his words that he said at an inopportune time. And now I'm playing them back to him later on. And now he's angry. And we got to I think we got to get through this because Trump has clinched and it's going to be Trump Biden. So we got to pick one. And the number one cheerleaders now that have been anointed by the intelligence community is Steve Baker and Blaze TV. Now that's not my leader. So I'm just saying we have to pick who's going to be our leader going into this next 5 or 6 months.
And it's 12:01 p.m. on the East Coast. We've somehow managed to fritter away another hour, guys. Thank you so very, very much. It's such a pleasure to have you both. And I'm going to have to study all of this after the show and get caught up on David's amazing stuff. And wow, so much packed into a short period of time. But guys, thank you again, and everyone, please do. Let's give a shout out to Rick Olson. I see he's in the chat room. I heard that his wife was having some health problems, and we wish her well. And everybody else, I see Fred Vinci there. A number of our old friends from years back are joining us here on the chat room. I did open up the YouTube this time, guys, but mostly I don't because of YouTube censorship. Today, I think we managed to get by without any but big trigger words for their AI. So I'm going to leave these shows up, but please do sign up for the Rumble channel. I will not be on YouTube forever, and I don't want to miss you. So please join us there.
And John, a quick shout out to our doctor with the tumor in Michigan. I won't say her name. And Andy gave me this shirt because he said Andy also is going to be stepping down because of the health with the heart.
Oh, no. Oh.
Well, he just doesn't want to have another incident. And so but he gave me the shirt as a good lucky for St. Patty's Day.
Yeah.
And John, you're the consummate Irishman. He said, if you got to wear green. And he gave me the lime green. So, John, we hope you're going to be doing a St. Patty's Day concert again this year with drummer. We don't know.
Well, to TBA, probably not this year. We've got so much going on. Drummer, my wife, Marcia, is still devoting all of her time to doing this editing so we can continue putting out the next 3 or 4 chapters of The Sleeper Agent by A.W. Finnegan on McDuff Lives podcast. That's her concentration right now, and I'm so very grateful to her for what she's been doing to support. And also, I'll mention, my own health. She has given me a fantastic support in regards to diet. She knows about nutrition. She's helping me, and I, for somebody that was told some pretty damn bad news back in June, I feel great. People tell me I'm looking great. I feel good. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and keep a positive attitude because that's a lot of it. Sure, our doctor friend who you mentioned, she's a wonderful, wonderful person, and we keep her in our thoughts and prayers as well. All right, David, thank you again. George.
Thanks, George. Thanks, John.
Thanks,
Look
Dave.
forward to next time. Bye now.
Bye-bye.